Hello everyone, wish you all well, and if you're new here, welcome. I woke up a few days ago, something really amazing, my newsfeed grabbed my attention. It says that Maria Ressa Rappler was supposedly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I thought, is that a hoax? Well, I read as noted in the Nobel website, Ressa, together with Dmitry Morotov of Russia, were both awarded the prize for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. Well, that's quite amazing. For starters, this is the first time ever in history that a Filipino has been awarded the Nobel Prize. Well, that is if she's considered truly and genuinely Filipino by citizenship. Well, at least she is 100% of Filipino descent, I suppose. And out of all the 975 Nobel laureates from 1901 up to today, 2021, only a few women have received it. Ressa being the 19th female Nobel Peace Prize recipient and the 58th female Nobel laureate in history. Bravo! So, what has Maria Ressa done to get nominated and chosen to receive this prestigious award? Is she deserving indeed to be one among all the Nobel Peace Prize laureates in history, which now totals to 134 individuals and organizations around the world? Watch this video to learn more. Don't forget to subscribe to Neuro. Well, you might be wondering why this topic is here. This channel is about neuroscience and how it affects most, if not all, aspects of our lives. And as I have shouted in my channel's cover, life is 90% neuroscience. And I suppose I owe you an explanation for that in a future video. Well, manipulation of public perception is definitely neuroscience. And it's all over us, both in mainstream media, now also in social media. I know that all of you will either agree or disagree with what I'll be saying here. Well, that's a given. Cannot please you all. Some of you would look at me as a saint. Others would revile me as a sinner. Well, suit yourselves. The Nobel Peace Prize is one of the 6 separate prizes which, according to the words written in Sir Alfred Nobel's will, are awarded by the Nobel Foundation to those who, during the preceding year, have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. Aside from the prize for peace, Nobel Prizes are also awarded in the fields of physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, literature. Since 1968, the prize in economic sciences in memory of Sir Alfred Nobel. This latter prize was established and funded by the Sveriges Riksbank, which happens to be Sweden's central bank. Let's digress a bit and look at some history. Alfred Nobel was a Swedish engineer, chemist, and industrialist. He was most notable for his invention of, yes, you guessed it, dynamite. And after he died in 1896, they opened his will. Boy, did it cause a lot of controversy, not just in Sweden, also internationally. Why? Because in it, Nobel wrote that much of his accumulated wealth would be used to establish a prize fund. And whether he did it out of regret and remorse for having invented dynamite, no one really knows. So let's go back to this Nobel Peace Prize. Since March of 1901, the Nobel Foundation has awarded this Peace Prize every year, with a few exceptions, to those who have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and the holding and promotion of peace congresses. It has been presented every year on December the 10th, which is Alfred Nobel's death anniversary, and the only one of the Nobel Prizes presented in Oslo, Norway, all the others being presented in Stockholm, Sweden. Nobel wrote in his will that the recipient of such an award was to be selected by the 5-member Norwegian Nobel Committee, which was appointed by the Norwegian Storting or Parliament the supreme legislative body of Norway. We all know that world peace would always come at cost of politics, so it is not surprising that due to its political nature, for the most part of history, among all the Nobel Prize categories, the Nobel Peace Prize has been the subject of a lot of controversies. And would that include the most recent one, awarded to Ressa and Moroto? From the terms of his written will, it was Alfred Nobel who decided the Peace Prize was to be awarded by a committee appointed by the Norwegian Parliament. This is in contrast to the other Nobel Prize categories, which were all to be handled by Swedish committees, such as the Karolinska Institute's 50-member Nobel Assembly, who chooses the Nobel laureates for physiology or medicine. And you may ask what are the reasons for Nobel's peculiar choice. There wasn't a tinge of an explanation left by Nobel as to why, but nowhere was it written either by Nobel that this Peace Prize committee was to be exclusively composed of Norwegian citizens only. And we also doubt if Nobel indeed wished that political experience was to be a primary qualification for those committee members who were to decide the awarding of this prize. But in all of history, the Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee has always been composed of Norwegians, appointed by the Storting or the Norwegian Parliament. Hence, its composition would necessarily reflect the inclination of the dominant political parties in the Storting. And the 2021 Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee is neither an exception. It is currently composed of these people I'm showing here. They are all Norwegians. In 1974, a poll was made by a member of the election committee of the Norwegian Storting. Berit asked that the Storting should reconsider its traditions in the appointment of members to the Nobel Committee is concerned, that it would be significant if the committee was constituted by persons who, to a higher extent, represented the world community both ideologically, culturally, and geographically. So, should the Norwegian Nobel Committee include some non-Norwegian citizens? Should their appointments be made on the basis of scholarly as against political merits? Could an all-Norwegian committee, one that is even composed of Norwegian ex-politicians, be truly and completely independent? Aren't they expected to be biased, and wouldn't national interest play a role in that committee's deliberations? This has been an oft-repeated concern, not just among Norwegian politicians, especially after the controversy arising from awarding the prize in 1973 to American Henry Kissinger and Vietnamese Lee Duc-tho for being accessories to a Vietnam War ceasefire. Yet, the bombings in neighboring Cambodia still continued. Tho declined to accept said award, noting that peace was not attained and that the US and South Vietnam were violating the Paris Peace Accords. At that time, many peace demonstrators against the war in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia found it simply hard to understand how these two politicians who were responsible for that war could be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Apart from Kissinger and Lee Duc-tho, many other controversial awardee choices have arisen out of this predicament, such as the awarding of the prize to US presidents, including Theodore Roosevelt in 1906 and more recently Barack Obama in 2009, and both of which were definitely tinged with political undertones. And of course, there was also 1994's recipient Yasser Arafat, who, though generally viewed as a martyr by the Palestinians, was also regarded by the Israelis as a terrorist. Another one of these important controversies was the case of Mahatma Gandhi. People have asked why, even with his international stature in relation to his advocacy for nonviolent resistance, which is plausibly very much connected to peace itself, has never become one among these Nobel Prize laureates. In 2012, I find it quite ironic for no less than Rappler itself to feature this very informative article from Agence France Presse entitled "Is the Nobel Peace Prize Losing Its Prestige?" 2012 was incidentally the year
the Norwegian Nobel Committee's choice of the European Union as the laureate again was mired in much controversy. To quote from this article, farce, scandal, joke, ridiculous, and absurd, those are a few of the terms detractors have used to brand the Norwegian Nobel Committee's picks in recent years, mixed in with the usual praise heaped on Oslo.
Now, it's 2021, and here comes Maria Ressa. I said earlier, Ressa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. Renowned writer and national artist F. Sionel Jose may have a point worth listening to here when he asked, and I quote, Maria Ressa does not deserve the Nobel. The Philippine press is alive and well, not because of Maria Ressa. No writer is in jail. There is no censorship. Duterte hasn't closed a single newspaper or radio station. The real test for journalists was made during the Marcos dictatorship when he imposed censorship, closed all media, jailed journalists. Again, here's another one from F. Jose. He said, ask yourself, what heroic sacrifice has Maria Ressa done for freedom in the Philippines? Who is funding her? I suppose it would be prudent for us to make a distinction between press freedom as against responsible journalism. Is twisting stories, making them appear as news, albeit in a sensationalized yet misleading way, and all the while capitalizing on one's clout as a mainstream journalist. Would that be called responsible journalism? So, what's my take on this? I would definitely agree that in today's world, social media may be considered as the great equalizer. Whereas before, it was solely the mainstream media that completely monopolized control what news and views was supposed to be, presenting it veiled in their own lenses and admittedly getting exclusively paid for it by advertisers. Now, by virtue of internet technology, we have social media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and other similar platforms. So it's safe to conclude that mainstream media has felt the threat, the ever increasing influence of internet based social media platforms. Ressa herself acknowledged that. And look, for instance, practically all of the major mainstream media outfits now have their own YouTube channels. But it is neither a truth that mainstream media is the sole purveyor of truthful news. For certain, there have been numerous past instances that mainstream media has delivered as fake news. I need not go through them all one by one. The example of Fox News peddling Trump biased info would probably be enough. The case of the Philippine so-called keyboard warriors on social media during Duterte's 2016 presidential campaign was an entirely different case, though. Ressas called them propaganda machines, trolls, and fake news purveyors. She was talking about vocal online personalities, which are the bloggers and the vloggers, which included Sas Rogando Sasot, RJ Nieto, who at the time went by the moniker Thinking Pinoy, Grisette, Laurita Chu, and countless others. And yes, you may include some with the so-called non-elite or non-conio backgrounds like the blog of Esther Margot Olson, more popularly known as Mocha Olson. She might be regarded as sleazy by many, but truth be told, I learned later on that her drive and fervor to support Duterte's stance on criminality came out actually of her semblance of a vendetta for having lost her father to a hired assassin sometime in 2002 when she was in her second year in medical school at the University of Santo Tomas. Her father happened to be Judge Oscar Gary Uson, was a regional trial court judge in Pangasinan, whose death was thought to be related to certain criminal cases he has handled. I myself would know, because at that time, I was one of them. these so-called keyboard warriors. For sure, I am real, and I wasn't a troll. I discussed my arguments rationally and intelligently, and I personally knew of friends of mine, many others who did their own personal campaign on social media using their own ways. And I did not just do my best to campaign social media accounts either. I even sent some articles for publication in the local print media in my locality. I am not saying that the potential of social media to be tinged, biased, and influenced by certain political third parties is not as big as what is mainstream media. Of course, like all other platforms, there will always be a room for abuse and fake news. Trump supporters have taken advantage of it and succeeded when Trump became the US president. That's precisely the reason that it becomes our personal responsibility as individuals to thresh out all information we receive, put on some grain of salt, and not just swallow it whole, hook, line, sinker, and all, without putting much thought. And this applies not just to social media, but to all forms of information that we get, including that from the so-called mainstream media. So let us make it a point not to be fooled and duped. And isn't a healthy, rational discussion in social media, even if every now and then it is dotted with annoying and at times incendiary comments from attention grabbing malicious personalities whose primary intent is to avoid boredom by creating more drama in their lives? Isn't that a good sign of a healthier democracy as compared to that wherein the self appointed gatekeepers are the at times holier than thou mainstream media practitioners? As I've already mentioned, there have been many proven instances that so called mainstream media were actually the purveyors of fake news themselves. Some additional note. In my own experience, I've talked to a lot of patients of mine who have seen and experienced for themselves the dramatic improvements attributed to the fight against illicit drugs, especially methamphetamine, or what is locally called as shabu. I had this patient who is already in his 70s and still volunteers as a coordinator of the anti-drug committee of their local village or barangay because he has seen a lot of decrease in the use of legal drugs and corresponding crime rates in their locality. I also remember well this patient of mine from Philippines' southernmost island province of Tawi-Tawi vouches that today it is much, much safer in their place already, especially after the drug lords and drug pushers have been significantly curtailed because of Duterte's drug campaign. And since Tawi-Tawi is considered the country's backdoor, a lot of drug-related smuggling activity used to happen there, including some airplanes dropping off illicit drug-containing pouches in designated zones offshore to be picked up later by drug dealers and pushers themselves. The war against the illicit drug trade and its mafia-like cartels, of course, would always entail violence. A weak leader that lacks political will to impose could never, ever succeed in such a war. Neuroscience has identified that a lot of these so-called drug lords in real life are hardened criminals with neuropsychologically disordered personalities, innately lack empathy and conscience. And that if such disordered personalities are already deeply ingrained, or worse, perhaps even genetic in nature, the chances of them going back to the fold of society, becoming normal empathic citizens who are capable of having compassion to their fellow human beings, would almost be nil. What I repeatedly hear from direct sources in the grassroots, or ground zero, as you might say, including barangay captains and counselors, and who happen to be my patients, is that a lot of those identified as drug war related deaths were mostly pushers or runners who were summarily executed by their own handlers in order to protect their identities and to avoid the risk of getting exposed themselves. Now, with the significant diminution of the illegal drug trade, a corresponding drop in crime rates, many of these grassroots communities at the level of the barangays are a lot more peaceful than before. And that perhaps gives us a simple explanation why Duterte's administration has gotten high approval ratings in relation to its fight against drugs. This topic about manipulative and toxic neuropsychologically disordered personalities that are often seen in positions of power and fame would certainly merit a discussion of its own. I guess I would make another video of that soon. That would definitely be a good way to educate the public about them, their existence. So what with Maria Ressa? I applaud Maria Ressa for having accomplished such a great feat. It's a feather in her cap indeed. And to quote Ian Macabenta in his Manila Times article, is the culmination of a long campaign to promote Ressa as a hero of press freedom by Western media and some sectors of the international community, pegged Duterte as an authoritarian leader. I do remember some things in your science, for Ressa does seem to look more than qualified enough to be what we call a glib, fearless, superficially charming, and smooth-talking personality. Indeed, she can easily throw you off your feet with her often baseless and twisted, yet insistent grandiose allegations, sugar-coated with much hype, drama, and sensationalism. And she does seem to be enjoying a lot of the attention she is getting, both the positive and the negative, including her criminal case convictions, even rallying them to get more sympathy for her alleged cause. And thus the fact that the libelous article published in 2012, allegedly to defame businessman Wilfredo King, which was again republished with corrected typographical errors in 2014, a case of a lack of remorse or guilt on her part, or was it done for some other hidden agenda perhaps, knowing for a fact that businessman King was asked to invest 100 million pesos to Rappler, yet declined such an offer before that? Does she have a disordered personality, much like what a lot of drug lords have, a good number of which would unquestionably qualify for a disordered, narcissistic, psychopathic, or sociopathic personality? Well, I wouldn't know. I am not personally acquainted with her, and I am just basing my observations, opinion on how she acts and comments about things in her video footages and interviews, much like how a lot of neuroscience advocates have made their own observations about Donald Trump. And I have a message to you, Ms. Ressa. Through your online Rappler portal, you are indeed maliciously painting the grim but false picture of the Philippines that is like the Marawi siege, or perhaps even the Afghanistan war zone, if only to advance your own personal interest, to gain worldwide sympathy to your fictitious narratives. But let me ask you this. Haven't you yourself acted as a purveyor of fake news several times? Do you agree with Maria Ressa being chosen a laureate of peace by the Nobel Foundation? Or do you think she's one of those which the 2012 Rappler article itself considered as a farce, scandal, a joke, or perhaps even somebody ridiculous and absurd? Let's talk about it and bring it out in the comments below. And to promote awareness, do share this video so that the public may be enlightened. Please, stop labeling me a DDS or whatsoever doing this. Let's all just help each other get educated with what's going on around. That way, we can make the whole world better one day at a time. If you'd like to support this channel, go buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below. And I'll see you in my next video.